Rāngzō khasāṃ Devi Dēnā Nīpō Lā Vichū Kū Wā Sīrita Ngāñchī Lē Ngāñchū Kī Yamlīn Chēpā Lā Ngāñchū Kī Tā Tēndī Ngāñchū Kī Lū Tēndī Yāqō Chī Mē Bāi Nā Yamlīn Yāqō Chī Tū Mē Bā Rā Chī Sā Yīnzā Ngāñchū Yamlīn Chēpā Lā Lū Tēndī Yāqō Chī Kū Wā Rēs Tēnē Sā Tā Lū Tēndī Lā Ngāñchū Yamlīn Chī Kī Tēn Yāqshū Lā Kā Rē Lā Nā Dāwā Kē Tāng Chō Chū Sāng Wī Kū Lū Tēndī Tā Dēnchū Lū Tēn Sā Tē Ndi ngāzu mi lū tī, dāngchū lū tī sā tī yā, chī ngāzu chē nyam lēn chī yā lī yā, dā chī kī tēn yā shō tī rē sō rā. Tī nē sā dā dāngchū lū tī sī tī, dā wā sā tī, jō wā sā tī, dā wā kī tāng jō chū sā wī lū tī lā tī, dā wā lā nā kā rē lā nā dā, ngāzu mi khān bī kī nē kī lē, dā wā tī lā nā dā wā sī wā rē sā. Chī sā mi khān bī nē, mi khān bā sā nē kī, tē lē kī wā nā chū chī yā kō khā bī wā mā rē sā. Chisa tēne tēle chāwā tēla, ngā tsukī dāwā rē sē, wā tē kāsā ngā tsukī nē tē dāwī kī, dār chū kī lū tēn sē tē dāwā kī kī ngō tē, dā dūs kāsā ngā dū shū rā.
Good morning. Last night we came to start to look at the chapter on taking the very essence of this life, which comes about to recognizing the great value of what we have achieved. Because all too often we take for granted this life that we achieved, seeing it as ordinary, not recognizing it as being special. And this means we end up not valuing our life, and therefore our life and this opportunity, and therefore just letting it pass away or pass by without taking its essence or achieving the very heart of the potential of this life. And the way that is presented to come to recognize and appreciate just what we have achieved is through the presentation on the 18 freedoms and endowments. So of these freedoms and endowments, last night we looked at the freedoms. So what these 8 freedoms refer to is having attained freedom from an unfree state. An unfree state where one lacks the free time or leisure to be able to engage in the Dharma. Having attained freedom refers to, in this context, attained the freedom or free time to engage in the Dharma.
아니 두심배와 삼대 시비기 야 아니 지부 쳐와서 초지게 두심배와서 라디라 세령 보래서 직제 대대게 바나 다 주지고 거비어 말해서 언디나지 수메 내 소소기고 람귤라 마기행게 예만요 되니 수메 소소기고 가사되기야 아니 라치랑 보래서 안데서 개베나 주지하고 거비어 말해서 가상어들이 다 라치랑 보고 소야 될 때니게 대세니로 시슈로다.
So last night we went through all 8 of the freedoms, and we concluded with the 8th one, which was being the freedom of not being born as a long-lived God. And as we saw in Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation of this, so in the ebook, it's near the bottom of page 68, so that's the handout, and in the published book, it's on page 60. There, Lama Tsongkhapa presents that the long-lived gods are of 2 types. Those without perception and those in the formless realm. So those without perception or without thought in the 4th dhyana of the form realm is one class, and the second class or type are those in the formless realm.
미혼비기에 땀 세대한테 된주 배치시겨 여가다 디나데 가르송으로서는 대비 제외 따도 예비기 되라 나처럼 벌시도 지산 되라 대비라 아니 지금 지게 그디나 지거로 레가로 진 파지 뒤수디 파지 베스 잘라로 슈라 제대가 하디 대비 하디게 아니 대저야 나처럼 벌이스 그래서 체증고 쉬우셔 버려와 체증고 쉬우셔야 되네 최지야 고비요 막아서 뇌비 자원을 파이양 봐 내가 자야 파이양 되지 네 최지야 고비 맞아 안디수야 라체령 보스에서 송요래서 지사다 미곤비 얘기에 라체령 본 세야디 네 미곤비 얘기 담세 되는 된주디 나려야 뇌비게 아 되게는 다도 뒤다도 안 자와라야 코르디 직 잘하시고 야래가래 지대는 되게다 사되게 라
Those two divisions of long-lived gods are as per Nagarjuna's commentary on the letter to a friend, or the commentary to Nagarjuna's letter to a friend. And then we come here to returning to the text where we concluded last night, to looking at a further text. So now the last sentence in this section, Discourse on the 8 unfree states, explains long-lived gods to be gods of the desire realm, who are constantly distracted by activities of desire. So in the previous text, long-lived gods were referred to those, to some in the form realm, as well as those in the formless realm. Now there's another explanation, which presents them as being in the desire realm, and gods in the desire realm who are constantly distracted by activities of desire. So in other words, these gods, they are consumed, or their activities, mental and physical activities, are dominated by pursuing activities of desire. Therefore, they are in an unfree state. They lack the freedom to engage in Dharma activities because their activities relating to the pleasures of the desire realm dominate them so.
나 뒤빌할래야 직식 망부여라 뒤빌라 되라 망부여 rik 망부여라 바다 니네게 저기 제대 직 숨지사 숨시간을 뒤빌라 한디오기 디 빠라디와 뒤갈라 아니야지 사간을 메디게 바나간을 예바 니네가 하루지만 오시고래 니네게 라 내로지 망부여라 시고 지사 뒤빌라 망부여라 바다 지사 디나데다 뒤빌라 사치는 보셔야지 다양 뒤별 하나에 죄념의 제한다 제 자주 선바다 념의 제가 뭐 여러 와 미원에 다디나 다디니게 맞이게 다 지금 내가 직거 뒤줄배 상한신 내가 자자한테 직전에 고걸 되는 안 지금 뒤별라 죄기 자와 균에 선마당인 다 고업만 매디가 다 여러 와 뒤서 다디 라체링 보내야지 뒤순 거로 말 뒤별라 상마 차고 말아 여러 전주 파괴 가서 여러 전주 선바 연구를 남님들 망부여와 취한 야구 망부여와.
What we see in this explanation of long-lived gods, those who lack the freedom to engage in Dharma activity, these are included within the many types of desire realm gods. So amongst the desire realm gods, there are those of many different types or classes. So by no means are all of them in an unfree state, and not all of them are considered to be long-lived gods. So they're gods in the heaven of the 33, they're gods in other other abodes, and amongst them there are those who definitely engage in Dharma practice, as amongst the gods in the desire realm. There are also ordinary as well as Arya bodhisattvas amongst the gods of the desire realm. So by no means are all gods of the desire realm long-lived gods. So there certainly are those who can engage in the Dharma. But here we're referring to specifically a type who, because of their obsession with the pleasures of the desire realm, that dominates their activities, and therefore they don't have freedom to practice the Dharma.
대선 시쇼를 대선 시용을 해.
Geshe?
당연히 숨지자숨만도 상하려와 딜할 하마이세 하디야 상하디고 대 숨지자숨세 하디 다 점리 토쇼가 되한 토쇼디 디 바나가래 되는데 타라라 가이디 출가 샤주 와지 세고 냐지 대선 시용을 해.
So the desire realm gods, there really are many different, I don't know how to say, like classes or divisions. So there are those that, like ourselves, abide on the earth. So we as humans, we know we live on the earth, and there are gods, both gods and demigods, who live on the earth. And then there are those who live in the sky. And amongst those that live on the earth, those who are, you could say, in the country which is considered the most superior or the supreme, is the heaven of 33. And then above them, there are 4 other groupings. I don't know the names other than one is Tushita, and then 3 others as well. So there are many different, one could perhaps say abodes, rather than nations, abodes of where gods of the desire realm abide.
자, 이제 가든 세계에 들이야 다들이 아주기 계산하신지 아니 계실이야 다른 거 주고 빈도 아주 최소한하지 다른 거 권바시 어두시네 가든 이게 최진세야지 아들이요 그래서 월다 권바하신지 가든 이게 최진시고 다들 계합나지데 가든라고 그래. 내려야야스 공부하실 건데 이 추진시월 세상 저 다들이 내가 쉬어서는 저기 가서 지준 잠보 공부 쉬어서들 가든스 쉬어서 월다 쉬어서 가든스 대 쉬어서 월 가든스 사제 쉬어와 내지라지 내쉬어와 나세디 벤디고 라비도 계합당아서 뒤에 벤디고나 추여로와 이내 벤디고 면에 계사지여로와 계세로와 벤디고 계세로와 메디시메 벤디고 계세로와다 지다 가든 람나 벤디고 차상하기로와 다 벤디고 계사지여로와 내려야 정한주데 신나길이야 타들여로와 공부도 다른 곳이여로와 디나시데 가든 가소래 이게 이 추진시 월때래 공부나신데래 간데게 나로래 간데 쿠래요. 말행이 여기도 간데 세디 지다 사진이 기합직 나시지 내지제 이 간데스를 다 딜이야 그런 종 나시 기합 나시지다 디나야 야스 공부 나시 지겨래지래 나 당보다데 디여래제 딜 지진 잡아 공부 가셔서 게디 이게 추수 공부 나신데를 쉬어래서 왔다. 대슈어에 제자의 가이딩기 디기합들 최소 도스는 주간데 진짜 보면 슈서디니 슈어에서
So in the god realm of Tushita, this, as we know, is the abode where Maitreya abides. So within Tushita, there are many different classes of gods. So we can understand Tushita then in terms of our own situation here. So we are in a secluded area, an area that is secluded from the region of Greater Bendigo. So in terms of likening this to the situation in Tushita, Greater Bendigo, the larger area, would be Tushita, and then within or aside, within the Greater Bendigo area, we have our secluded, our isolated area of Atisha Center. And this would be, in this analogy, would be likened to where Maitreya abides. So there's the greater area, which is all considered Tushita, but within that, there is the smaller secluded area where Maitreya abides.
박바이 기시면 다디 파월 한번 보여로 와대 박바이를 박바마요 소스에 담아라 여러 와대 디디 연변한 저기다 간실에 공부로 시대 지순자 뭐 지식숙서 공부 모두 지겨워 와 내려가서네 아니 이게 추진시월 다 디니 곰비게 와다 종케나신데 지가 슈스지어와 여러 종케 디 네델이야 네 가덴스지다 가덴레월 제자다 최송사 종케날마 송고로와데 디나데 망고여로와데 말 송고여로와데 최샤가 로랑 진짜 디로와데 추추치 데 곰발의 슈거를 곰바스도 돼 다른 부제사 시고로와데 지난데 데는마 최송아 야 마야 두고 야 최슈가 연구라데 마야 두고 송고로와데 최송사데 종케 미디게 슬라이드게 송고로와데 제사지 최송데 디나데다 최냠네 지겐 안데 지미 파베 가사 연구래 네 디멤베 소소기와 연구로와 나서 연구래 아무 마사데 가지 니고 제데 제 많이 유로
So within this area of Tushita, then there are beings there who are Arya beings as well as ordinary beings. And perhaps they all have interest in Dharma or perhaps not. But the secluded area where Maitreya abides, that is not the sole place where Dharma is taught. Just like our situation here, people from Bendigo will come here to receive teachings, and likewise people from here will go into Bendigo. So too. In the situation in Tushita.
Yeah. 나디네 저거다 저거 주세요. 중국어는 마 저거 이발아 니레스 다 랑주랑아 저거 주들라 랑주랑아다 현주랑아스네 아니 주시송거다 저거 세다 가상의 다와 예디 손 주사바지 미건바 예라 제비 류딘데라 다다와 예제 다와 예서 다양 류딘데 양은 저 주세요 다 최념는 제리야 튕게 다 참고해야 되라 저거 주요래서 내 주들이 봐 소소랑랑기 뭐네 참고해야 되라 나 랑주랑아 하셔다 소소랑랑면에 현규원에 튕긴라고 해야 되라 튕긴데라 현주랑아 하셔 제사디네 자다 저거 주셔야 돼 니니 세드다 델리안 라주응아다 현주응아세네 조주요레에서 그러다.
That concludes looking at the 8 freedoms. Then the 10 endowments or opportunities. These are of 2 types. There are 5 which pertain to oneself and 5 that pertain to others.
다 라주응아데 가서 수송원이 다 류틴 수송원이 튕게 창화데 가고서 라주응아니 미니 위니 원보 창스 네 레타 말로 네바당 제보사.
Then reading from the text, this has 2 points or endowments. This has 2 points, of which the 5 endowments pertaining to oneself are being human, being somewhere central, with unimpaired faculties, no inexpiable heinous actions, and faith in the source.
다들 가르치네 다 소수기 최념는 체델이야 달바다 템지 김bio 고방 토득이 띵 개발 전지 개발하는 밀리 개고래서 지선 소소하게 류디 밀리야 개고지 미니스 밀리 개고래서 그러다.
And the first then is being born as a human being. So within this very body of a human being.
다 밀리 개발이네 안에 최념리지 고급 차상하기를 위해서는 디라요 말했으는 데 가르치고서 유수 개발시고 그래서 우유해야 돼. 우수 개발하세요.
But as we know, not all human beings have the opportunity to practice the Dharma. So therefore, there's a second endowment, being born somewhere central. So in the central area.
다 유수 개발이네 다 원본만 상관이네 되네 죄지하고 거라요 말아 진짜 원본 상관시고 그래서
But even if someone's born as a human in a central area, if one has impeded faculties, then one will be unable to engage in the Dharma. So therefore, a third endowment is having unimpaired faculties.
Dene le thamalo pa sede legi thamalo pa sede dene gasolil dadi le kunde la sopa yomare sen lokta ba ke ba se lokta jin legi thamalo pa legi thamalo ne la de ba ai je da legi thamalo pa sede le ngan se de ti ka se ti 참매게 le sa ji ro di sing ro chai le
And then the fourth endowment is not having committed any inexpiable, I can't say this, otherwise translated as any acts of immediate retribution. So not having committed any karmic acts of immediate retribution.
And
the final one is faith in the source, refers the source being the three baskets or pitakas of the Dharma.
That the Kawashagri said and Sungore, you said that Benedigo Nimasanjum and the Jana Soma, Jagi, you the Dresden area, she's a Dresden Tasso, Lumbati Kivan, you use the Kiava, the name the sugar. In a Jerum, you use the Kiava as a Karasuan. Coronam Yusek, Sagittal, you like the edge, we like the essay. She's not delicate and use the Kiava like the edge.
Then Lama Tsongkhapa explains that quotation from Shavaka Levels. Here, born somewhere central is to be born in a place where the four types of followers are active. So somewhere central refers to where the Dharma teachings abide. So historically, at the time of the Buddha, this would refer to the greater area around Bodh Gaya. But here Lama Tsongkhapa presents the explanation for the central area as being where the four types of followers are active.
And the coronamshi pen mavesa sajedi mikumbinis, Chisan Deda Jawa, the Mikuma Jawa Lera. That down the key of the Deda Jenny Gin, coronamshi, you said the Gina, the Usikabale, such on Duschine, Sumutua.
So this is the same as we heard last night in the freedoms, where the first freedom was the freedom of not living somewhere remote or in a savage land. So here, this endowment or opportunity is where one lives, where the four types of followers are active.
Now, one would say the Lingu so Mason Shings, Yala, the Nila. Mina so Chasan Tangwa said Delia, Womba Sangwa, Zakasan, and the Womba Masawadi, and the Mikumbi, and Delia, and Deda Jawa de la Dawa said that didn't answer that year, the Chasan Womba Chasan Tangwa, and the Garsori, Delia, and the Womba Sangwa said.
Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation of unimpaired faculties. Unimpaired faculties consist of not being intellectually challenged or mute, and having fully functioning body parts, ears, eyes, and so forth. So again, this is the same as we had above when looking at the freedoms, having the freedom of being intellectually challenged or mute or having incomplete faculties.
That lady Tamaloba said, Tamegele, Sosugi, Jeba, Majeba, and the Shanley, Jema Juba, the land lady Tamaloba.
The fourth, that of inexplicable heinous acts, implies not having committed or caused others to commit an uninterrupted action.
And the nearly Deva said, Jidin and Jidin Debi Garbi Chetam Jin Gibi Ne Duole Deva de Duanin Dir Dinusumla Sungala Jawosa.
And then the fifth endowment pertaining to oneself is faith in the source. Is there faith in the foundation? The foundation or source is the same word, from which all the mundane and supramundane virtuous dharmas arise. Discipline. Here, discipline should be understood to encompass all three baskets of scripture. Just to say, this translation of discipline, it's can be translated as Vinaya or monastic discipline. What it means is to tame or to subdue. So that meaning, I think, makes the word discipline a bit clearer, to tame or subdue.
And so, Nela Deva Jidina Jidin Debi Garbi Che Tam Ji Gibi Ne Sura. Jizandanga Jugi and Jidimbe Gewa Seda City, Yamnage Gewa Dugata, and it's a Jidim Lam, Solam, Jolam Gag, Tablam, and Jigdelia and the Poppy Lam. Yamling Jimbati, near the Jitin and Jitility Lam, to the garbage church Jitina, Jitility, garbage church, and Yamling Gawati Surwada. The Niki Gawa Tamji Gigi, Nedi, Karelity in a Kiosan, that do said the Kigore, do said that delete in a Kigore said. She said, City Gala, but the city Gawas and Kiri Yamlenchiada, and Jig. Then it's all on the Jolam Gawakia, then the Tonon column, Palam Yamlem, Yujimba Gawa Kiwi Chazan, and to get that the Garsore, and Denusum in the Kigore.
We explained then this fifth endowment pertaining to oneself a little further. So having faith in the source or foundation from which all mundane and supramundane virtuous dharmas arise. So this then refers to having faith in, as it says here, a discipline, which we should understand to mean all three baskets, or the three baskets of the entirety of the Buddha's teachings, which lead to the cultivation of virtue, both the virtue that one accumulates of a mundane or ordinary type, as well as that lead to paths, the generation of paths within, as well as the progression along the various paths, the ordinary paths of accumulation and preparation, as well as the Arya paths. So, what do we have here? So that all virtuous dharmas refers to all acts of virtue. And this all arises from the basis, which is the three baskets. In particular, it mentions Vinaya, or discipline.
지금 이니 도와 두유주침세 도와 디 말해서 그러다 이 도와세대 가르고 그래서네 데네스무 고고 말도 맞아 데네스미는 두이 데네 지구 말해서 그래 남윤당한테 도와라비도 두이 데네 라로 고고 맞아 샹달 고고 말와 진짜 다디 도와세디 들어와세데 셈 들어와세지 지고 진짜 다디 갑디 도와세대 가르고 그래서네 데네스무가 데네스무라고 그래 송고래지래.
So the way to understand the word here we have translated as discipline. Again, the Sanskrit's a bit more clearer with that of Vinaya. The way to understand it in this context, as the text says, here Vinaya should be understood to encompass all three baskets of scripture. And the reason for this, again, that the word Vinaya then, as a verb, means to tame or subdue. So the way one tames or subdues one's mind is through all three baskets, not just through that of Vinaya, but through all three. And that is exactly as it says here. Here, Vinaya should be understood to encompass all three baskets or all three pitakas of scripture, not just that of Vinaya. Therefore, in brief, the fifth endowment pertaining to oneself means having faith in source or basis or foundation, which refers to the entirety of the teachings of the Buddha, these three baskets. So having faith in these because they are the method by which one accumulates virtue.
And in Zadang, Nelia, the social leading a channel and a me bache, miliki ovache, and a me gave us mother on board Sanduba, the me gave an on watch as a mass of relation go in the church of Ragio Marwa, the inside me, but the district Dialena, on board some watch go is. That on board some way in there, and they use to kiss go cheat, think hand, should so you say such a go is right. Some coronam, you said such mother coronam mesale, and the one was hard to me given a church, Sungan made men church air go Ragamares, just under coronam you such you go such. Then this year, and Dimaze, that is yeah, the niggy, this was me, but it won't watch us on Sawa, and the Jew say, just as on Sonsa, you have the coronam you said the Geva in there. That diva chimbo shu, just Hamigalier, G Passoba, the Masoba, Soba, Dajuba, Soba, Soba, and the Sangi, G good ma, Dora Soba, that then treating Shiba Soba, the Nigi, Sosugi, the Nigi Jegi, Jevena Samigali, that diva duptions at this Samage. And Sosugi, Majevena Shanla, Artura di Do, or the Jumbos, my Shevin, Dustin Shanla, Jejuba, and Samigali, Jeza, this. Jevena didn't church of Yakura Mares, she's not the nigger much what you go there, such Dustia. And then that is she got somewhere, the news from your Yishi and Devamena, the news from the Tusum Jigmarwa, Lumi Jigmarama, Majena, then Yamli Bati, she has Merwa, Mevanza, she's not the news from ya, and the Jig Ya Yishi and Deva Yuba de la Lumia. Here
we, so hopefully then these five endowments pertaining to oneself are clear, and then we can recognize that within ourselves we have achieved these. Firstly, we are all have been born as human beings. Moreover, we have complete faculties, because being born as a human being makes it much easier to engage with the Dharma, but if one's faculties are incomplete, one is severely intellectually challenged, or one cannot hear teachings and so forth, one will not, despite being born as a human, one will be unable to engage in the Dharma. Then thirdly, though, being born as a human with complete faculties, one also needs to be in an area where the four types of followers are active. So in other words, an area where the teachings are given, and therefore oneself can cultivate them within. And then fourthly, one has not committed any of the 5 acts of immediate retribution or cause anyone else to. So these are particularly powerful and non-virtuous karmic actions, that of killing one's mother, killing one's father, killing an arhat, causing a schism in the Sangha community, or drawing blood from a Buddha. So having done or caused someone else to do, encouraged someone else to do any of these 5 acts of immediate retribution would create a severe karmic impediment to be able to engage in the Dharma. And then fifthly, even if one has all of these endowments, but lacks faith or trust in the teachings of the Buddha, in the Vinaya, the Sutra, and the Abhidhamma, in those 3 baskets, if one lacks trust or faith in the teachings, one will not have the endowments or opportunities required to engage in Dharma practice.
제베이나 참매길에 사그리베스 최딘 시베나 참다데네 최다데 참매길에 사다 가서는 아니 가서래 참매길에 제바세도 참매길에 제다 가라가서는 나다 좀 보세요 봐다 안 산지구라 나생이 차진 발라서 봐다데네 최딘 시 발라서 봐 아니 그 좀바이나 데서 참매길에 사그리라로 와 제세다 최딘 시나 참매길에 땡땡 사그리베스 디워스 다음에는 대량한 삼단의 이유래제 Shiksen ma mevaso destroy mevaso and church mevaso. And then it's a less I guess. Sanji Gudi Meva Social, and then the Gundati Pator Meva, so when the Tamik Lesa Larua, Chesan Denege Layoda, Yanjura Tavene, then shooting she Mel Mashipoina, and then Tamik Lesavi, never Yore Yomarelam, that it man Yanji to shake out what. Di ma chöden kaga ba de chame le de mangbu sa yo ba pa sue ba da jun ba sue ba chöden shi ba din shi be ko nga sin ye cha chu ba de ni ge rig mangbu ro le ga le da de ya.
So there's amongst these 5 acts of immediate retribution, was it's translated here, these inexplicable heinous actions. There are many. The most commonly stated are killing one's parents, or an art, a foe destroyer, or drawing the blood from a Buddha, or creating a schism in the Dharma. But there are many others within this, such as the destruction of stupas and statues and so forth. And then on these points, whether they constitute an act of immediate retribution or not, there's quite some discussion.
Delia Venerable Lulia Dubje Masue Chadun Baina Chad Sanyugula Tang Nasiki Tajimba Lagrua, Chesa Sanji Gula Nuvache Chad Dumbaina de Tamile Sai Larua, Chesa Denizang Nanzu Lulia Jig Nuvache and the Chadun by Dubje Nuvache Chadun Baina and the Divasavi never Yomarwada Yomarwa Bene Nanzu Mirochina Bejike never Kale Habushuvena Delia. Nedile Sunkyoda Nedile Drevici, the main biggie, Anzu Supu Shashi Tangura, Supu Nugorwa, in a Shashi Tangur, in a Pembe Sambu Gunia Laje, Jigiza, Divasago Marwa, Pengurwa down there. Dinashi, Anzu Chudin Nimbarochina, Dadelea, and Chavada, Chuda, Ganga, Yanga, Yovan Pa, Yanjig, Dina, the Choa, Choarache, which Choache, Dine, and Chichudin Mashi, and Savoya was Shorwa. This is changing my Shivari was a Shivari. In a Kulong Pembe some daje, Delia, Deva the Pembe some day Shivari, the Delia, Tamik Lesa Yomarwa, Jazade, Chudin Shivas. That Chudin Shina Tamik Lesa Ben Chelia Mahawada, Bendigo, Nubi Sambi Gunia Laje, and Dinigi Nansimki Tony, and Shivaina, and Tamik Lesa Gresor. Dinashi Sanji Guli Pembe Simki, that Dinigi Deva, the Pembe Simki Chevana, Divasas Yomarwa, Chezatan and Simki, Gunyalade, Pan Nube Samba, Teve Saba, Nube Samba, Gunyalaje, Dinig, San Yukulia, dos Chevana, and it Samigli Sago, Resor, that Chezan.
One of the often quoted heinous acts is that of drawing blood from a Tathagata or from a Buddha. So the drawing of blood from a body is not necessarily non-virtuous. We know this in terms of medical treatments. And one assumes that when medical practitioners operate, they have a good motivation. So this certainly is a virtuous act. Even though the patient's body is being cut open, the motivation is virtuous. So if blood is being drawn, or the drawing of blood motivated by either a wish to bring harm or wish to benefit, is what determines whether the act is virtuous or non-virtuous. Similarly, if one destroys a stupa, this is not necessarily destroys, makes it quite. If one causes harm, intentionally harms the structure of a stupa, whether this is non-virtuous or not, again, depends on the motivation. For example, if a stupa that's quite old and worn away by the weather, if one has the skills and the wish to reconstruct that, or repair or reconstruct that stupa, one may need to prepare the surface. One may even need to break down parts of it in order to rebuild it. So doing that is would be done with a virtuous motivation, would be a virtuous act, although one is very clearly causing some harm or destruction to the body or the structure of a stupa. Whereas if one were to do it with a harmful motivation, that would be quite different. There very clearly would be a non-virtuous act.
And is the Rangungane Tsongkhapa. The Rangungane tuning about the Tsongkhapa in the Tsangway, Dan Church and Yamna regular Vesine, the San Yi Chusung Mene, then Church Yamerwade. So you tuning Chasan Tsangway, San Ye Page, and the San Ye Pemena, and the San Ye Sun Chusung Yomar. Then Chusung Mena, and Jun Yamnaja, the Nusumyama, then Yamnaja Goma. Jasan Dinigi, the Rangung in the Tsangway, not Tsangway in the tuning at Yobana, Church and Yamna regular Vesine, laying ever Yomare, Delia. 先用我呢参与推荐爱国的事，但来先就是啊，是但先就是啊，是中国了，先就是啊，你说的。
So these 5 endowments pertaining to oneself are all required in order to be able to engage in Dharma practice. But these alone are insufficient. There are also a further 5, those pertaining to others, which are also required in order to be able to engage in Dharma practice. The 5 endowments then pertaining to others are listed as, the first being, the Buddha has come, and secondly, taught the Holy Dharma. Thirdly, the teachings still remain, and are being followed. And lastly, there's loving kindness and compassion for the sake of others. Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation of these 5, relating to the first, the Buddha has come or arisen, means that after having accumulated the collections of merit and wisdom for 3 countless eons, he manifestly or evidently attained complete Buddhahood. So therefore the meaning of the Buddha has come or arisen means that after having accumulated extensive merit, then he attained complete enlightenment. Looking at the last bit of the explanation, he manifestly attained complete Buddhahood. So what this refers to is for this endowment to be fulfilled, this endowment pertaining to others, it's not sufficient merely that a being completed the accumulation of merit and attained enlightenment, but rather, just in the way that Buddha Shakyamuni has done in our world, he displayed the attainment of enlightenment in our world. So and thereby was able to reintroduce the teachings of the Buddha, or the Buddha Dharma into the world. So again, just to make sure I said it clearly, he manifestly attained complete Buddhahood. So instead of manifestly, you can say evidently or obviously, attained complete Buddhahood. So in other words, he displayed the attainment of enlightenment. This was clear and obvious to everyone that this being has attained enlightenment. So therefore, this first endowment pertaining to others means that the Buddha has appeared in our worlds. In other words, that he manifestly or obviously displayed enlightenment. So in the case of Buddha Shakyamuni in Bodh Gaya, that he displayed the attainment of enlightenment. That then is the first endowment.
폐화시 내가 자고 조화직 책도 상예 폐면에 되네 먼저를 요마로 지산 상예 폐고 그래지래 나 상예 폐는 이거는 디자미 이거 말에 가서는 되는 이바들라 담주 된바 상예 유치 송화지고 그래서 담주 된바세 그래서 담주 된바니 상예 삼 디년도 유치 된바고 서
The first endowment then pertaining to others is that a Buddha needs to come into our world and display enlightenment. But that alone is insufficient. That Buddha then needs to teach the Dharma. So this is the second endowment pertaining to others, taught the holy Dharma. And Lama Tsongkhapa explains it as, taught the holy Dharma means that the Buddha or his disciples have taught the Dharma.
네 상기 신 최된바 네 상기 호롱의 최된밤 되네 니 년뒤 라서비 최된바들라 네 담주 된바라 그래서 담주 된바 지사 상기 지부기 최된바 샤샤바이나 네 상기 최송 사제 상기 양알 대비기 최된 사회제라 네 되네 네 상기 최된바디 상기 수랑게 송바디 송예디 조사로 매요 되네 주님의 제고 그런말와 제가 네 진주 년뒤 남기 최된바이는 네 상기기 송시비 최대 년뒤게 냠는제 상기 호롱 주비rinla 상기 호롱의 최마송 되네 송비기 뒤서는 마 냠는제제 마 림바신의 상기기 즉 냥알의 대사바이네야 되네게 진주 로마 년뒤게 냠는제제 바 최송바이 송의 여바이네 다 담주 된바스게 예지 년뒤에 딜람나 지기르데 년뒤라게 년뒤세데 자주선바 연구로와 년뒤 전주선배 년뒤게 자시에들 상예전에 최랑게 년 현려 퇴발제 연시바들 퇴식으로 그래서는 자주선바 연구래 년뒤 민랑 다 년뒤세 연구이가 연구리다 전주선바다 년뒤라서 차상랍션이고로
So in the explanation from Lama Tsongkhapa, taught the holy Dharma means that the Buddha, perhaps the Buddha and his disciples have taught the Dharma. Initially, the Buddha, so for this endowment pertaining to others to be fulfilled, the Buddha who manifestly displayed enlightenment would then also teach. And then after he has passed from the world, his disciples would continue to teach. And here the word for translated as disciples is a good translation. It literally is hearers. So the meaning of hearers would be hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas. So disciples is a good translation, because the word hearer is in Tibetan is literally putting the words listen and hear together, and then it's translated as hearers. So in this context of disciples, it refers to all classes, all lineages of disciples of the Buddha, because they all listen to teachings and teach, and then can teach them. So hearers, solitary realizers, and bodhisattvas all are included then within this good translation of the word as disciples.
那的去电把些的去电把的水电把的呢，上一个嘛去送呀的，俺弟有上一个块建筑啊呢，年对的嘛送呀的了去电把是去电把的送法去电送法是我的，的是我的。
So therefore, again, the Buddha will have taught, and his disciples, those who have heard his teachings, will continue to teach.
那呢，你把的送把的了。去电把捏把些，去电把的捏苦的些，捏把些就苦的些，捏苦的些。但去电把的，但没得有苦的些了，去电还得有苦的些。你马上一配上，上一去送，等你地接了啊，年对了去送的，然后就早上的去里面呢，等你让地接了，给人米的给了呀，那现在听见现在他们的去接或那个嘛了，其实上一电把捏把就苦的，也是去电把。去上一个岁数，上一个电把的捏糊的，捏把就糊的是，这捏把些的，可能是那个的了呢，当不捏把就糊的是，就属于那种去电把捏把些。
Then the fourth endowment pertaining to others is that the teachings still remain, because it's for us to have a fully fledged precious human rebirth. That not only should the Buddha have manifestly appeared as a Buddha in our world, he needed to have taught, and his followers needed to continue teaching, and those teachings now still need to abide in our world or remain in the world.
是，这是他去电把捏把些人，都那可能是来我是呢，上阶性去电把呢。냥을 내 마디에 봐도 된다며 치 온도 제비 추 네 추기 네 두비기 최 만년 봐오 어서 만년 봐지나 될 최네 봐라 그래서.
So then Lama Tsongkhapa explains this fourth endowment, that the teachings, or this endowment, that the third endowment, that the teachings still remain. So I imagine everyone has the book in front of you, so you have that translation. I'm going to read my own translation, then we'll see with Geshe's explanation what stacks up, because I'm not so sure about this translation. So my own translation is that the teachings survive, means that the teachings of the Buddha that are to be accomplished, the means or method by which the ultimate Dharma emptiness is to be realized, has not degenerated, and therefore the teachings of the Buddha that present the entire path up to and including the attainment of Nibbana remain. So it's a little different from what we have in English, but Geshe will explain it now.
那就去上阶性去电把这的，那的上阶性去电把的对，那家求那的上阶个今天看的配置呢，这个รับตัวจุเจ้าบ้านก็ว่าเจ็บเจ้าบ้านจีน那上阶被去电把是短信时候，他求这个那么这上阶被去电，的那上阶性噻。근데 주대 산에 가르쳐를 와르나서 량 댐바실라서 초송로와 지산 디니기 최댐바 최댐 디최 가르 댐바에서는 니기 안에 당보 코와랭이 중에 되네 안에 게중고 되네야 안지게 초람 좌람 통람 곰람 곰 되네 밀로람 곰여도 곰발에 되네 아주 녀모 빠지 자준비 탈비가 뭐 톱투고 톱우리에서 되네기 냠내스면 소로와 지산 최댐바 최댐 안디네电把呢냥을 내 마디에 봐도 되니게电지네 안데 되니게 초람 냠 좌람 통람 곰람 밀로람 쓰데 초람 좌람 냥을 내 마디에 봐도 쓰데 예 돈데 비숑도 제바세 당보 냠내 림바디 코와레 녜중게 되네 초람게 되네 녜중사 좀마게 초람게 되네 좌람게 되네 좌람도 공발에 되네 돈나 바세 동반이 다 동반이 오숨 동반 된데 비숑 문도 제바세 돈나 바 동반이 문도 제바세디 동반이 오숨 도배고로 예되다 녀모 봐요 고주거래스 되네 녀모 방배 인보 다음에 봐또 동반이 도배로디 곰발에 되네 아니 지 탈비고 와도야 다 담지기고 와도야 이디 냠는디다 되네 경우도 집에 수유디 다 냠는 짐바디 제사들과 되네 냠는 짐바디 되네 주위에 가서 냠는 제와디 되네 주위에 주비체 만년바지 되네 만년바 유나 다 상이 때문에 내발에서 내요래서 안가도 와다 고 초람 졸람 통람 공람 밀lum람도 자주마 도고로 와다 나로와 제사 자주메고 원 토요 냥알리도 토요 벌당 뭐 내 코와랭이 준기인데 deni je cholam je na deni jolam je deni dame ba onsun tongba yin onsun topeki ge tonglam je ne digi nyembo che bala deni gomlam je ne deni na tarata jume te to milolam to yongro deni ge to deni ge nyamling rimbadi sangi sung ro deni sung de deni sangi sung se chele ya di chenju lo ma yin nyamlen je ma shan la she andi so nyamlen je du chen nyamling rimbadi ye de deni ge nyamling rimba che di 주번 냠내제 최대 다 여바이나 마 송하여 냠내제 여바는 다 최만냐 봐 여바래서 그러다 만냐 봐 오세 네 봐서 디스 다니 처럼 절럼세도 자상으로 봐 대신에 처럼 절럼 여러 년되라 여 랑결을 자상으로 봐다 다 좀발 년되다 좀 랑결을 좀 대신 좀 숨거용으로 봐다.
So then the meaning of the teachings still remain means that the after an extensive accumulation of virtue and enlightenment, extensive accumulation of virtue, both of that of merit and wisdom, a Buddha attained enlightenment, so just like Buddha Shakyamuni did, and didn't merely leave it at that, at the attainment of enlightenment in Bodh Gaya, but then taught the Dharma, so just as Buddha Shakyamuni did, teaching the Dharma in Varanasi. Then that Dharma that was taught was the various paths that need to be cultivated, starting with the training prior to cultivating the paths, such as reflecting on the sufferings of samsara and its causes, leading to a generation of definite emergence, and the attainment of the path of accumulation, and progressing through the path of accumulation to the path of preparation, whereby one then comes to eventually realize the ultimate Dharma, or how is it translated here, teaching the ultimate Dharma. In other words, where one comes to realize emptiness directly and thereby abandon the afflictions together with their seeds, so the causes of our suffering, and attain the path of seeing, progressing through the path of meditation, and eventually attaining the path of no more training, whereby one achieves a state of either a Theravada Arhat or a Mahayana Arhat. So this is the entirety of the teachings have been taught in their entirety, and none of these aspects or parts of the teaching have been lost or degenerated. So that is the meaning of the teachings still remain.
Isa denegi da sanji da sanji sungbi ka sanji chubi kala denegi che nyamne che yeba che da sanji gi anjele ya an kombo luruda papa thome la so ba ga gi pandu chubdin la so ba denegi sungbi ge denegi nyamne che horan so nyamtu na ma so ya ma sung ni du chin yeba za ne sanji temba ne ba re so chisa da denegi da mine ba cha ne gar cha ra sin denegi da nyamne che ne sosoran machine du shingen nyamne che me ro da me na sing marwa jing mashi du shan le ya na da jing cholam kom na cholam kom na da de tholam nyomo pa ya rimba ma shi shingen me denegi nyamne che me na da sang yi den ba de zo sa me ba cha so lo da nyamne che di shan le ya shi ma shi so so nyamne che me nyamne che me na shan le nyamne che tuen ga shi shing ma ro ma shing ba na de ko di pa zo sa lo da je sang yi den ba nyam sa mini ba me ba cha so che go lo ba da那这这些的这，这些的这学点把修，学点把念把修的，商业点把念把修了，念没念修的个是月没修了，月没修的商业点把的个的是呢，每商业个送些比这样，你考完了，你就见超南的呀，超南节、绝南节的呢，唐南节、广南节，他把推个把都年南节人把的了，但商业点把修了，就像你。냠는 제게 여바제 마샬레아시 근데 냠는 제게 되네게 냠는 제게 여대 바이나 근데 상이 때문에 내바래서 네 냠는 제게 매바 있는다 상이 때문에 요 말해서 그러다 요 말해서 요 말해라 조사를 매바래서
For the teachings to still remain or to still abide means that the entirety of the teachings that lead to the attainment of the state of enlightenment, that these are still alive and present in our world, just like they were at the time when Buddha Shakyamuni was present in our world. And here one can look back at this lineage of great masters from the time of the Buddha through to the great masters of ancient India, such as Nagarjuna and so forth, as well as to the subsequent masters from then up to our modern day, that have ensured that these teachings still remain in our world. Because for the teachings to remain, it's not sufficient that there are some teachings, but the entirety of the path that is to be cultivated within in order to achieve the state of liberation or enlightenment, that remains. And for it to remain, it's insufficient for it to be there to be the mere accessibility of knowledge or knowledge that can be accessed. It needs to remain within the continuum of practitioners. There need to be those who have cultivated these qualities, the qualities of the entirety of the paths within their own continuum. This is required for the teachings to remain.
자사레 자바레 아주 데니게 대체보 조제 될이야 롭녀치야 고갑디 베마스 기침부레서 어저산디 상이 때문에 내발라 롭전치가 미치니게 롭전치와기 제네네 저게 야침부 베 라도 말이잖아 롭전치가 다 망고 고거레스 대고거레서 데니 자데 롭전치가 기침부레서 대송거 제자 데니자 다 여름치기 가르스 공부시고라스네 대상 이제 잡아서에 돼서 요요 주어로 와다 지요요데 미 생리기야게도 될이야 지지단 지지소신에 잡아 하는 건 저게 아니지 잡아서에 요요 주어래 제자들이자 하는 건 지금 최로 지셔도 요도데 하는 가슴질에 취 로전식에 매반다 근데 냠내리바티 바시 신하요 말 냠내제 매와 차도로 제자들이 인자 상기 때문에 유니도 내비게 공부 시행 여름치기 최 냠내세데 지 롭종 제디 아니 잡아서 많이 봐 미게 롭종 제고 그래서 생이 따고 송전에 다대상 여름치기도 슬랍다 할이야 생이 따고 그래 아니 미게 수인에 생이 롭종 제고 그래서 생이 롭종 제서 되는 숨도 퇴섬 제고 그래서 그러다 퇴섬 제는 내가 제바제 힘주제 되는 지다 그러니까 코발랭이 주게다 가르쳐 소람 게다 가르쳐 졸람 게다 두시는 냠내 제의 신호도 된 냠내 제가 차고라 진이자 된 제가 예 rabjung로 제 뉴유에 되네 곧 가르소래 최기 마 냠내 진바데 내려야다 지소를 판도지 르드요 최고로 되는 자디 염지 공부하시지 도체네 난거로 송거로 되는 자다 지소나랴 지게 되니기 생이 더네 로지 제가 뭐로 받아
From what I've just said then, it should be clear that there is a great importance for those who have encountered the Dharma and have recognized the great opportunity that they have to not merely hear teachings or study teachings, but to train their mind in the teachings so that they are cultivated within. Because if the teachings, or to the extent the teachings have arisen within oneself, one has to that extent come to understand the Dharma. Mere intellectual knowledge is insufficient. One needs to have one's mind or be training one's mind in the Dharma. That is indispensable for the Dharma to remain present, active in our world. So amongst those who have the opportunity to radically transform their way of thinking, those nuns and monks who enter into monastic institutions where they have the opportunity and they embrace that opportunity to engage wholeheartedly in their study, in other words, learning as well as reflecting, they have a great responsibility to keep the Dharma alive in our world. Because again, the meaning of keeping the Dharma, for the Dharma remaining, is not merely that there is knowledge, but that it remains in the minds of practitioners. This is the actual meaning of it remaining. And if there are only one or two people who are studying well and thereby cultivating the Dharma within, this really is insufficient for the lineage of the teachings to remain. It becomes very clear that will almost certainly die out. Therefore, a great number of people striving to cultivate the Dharma within is required for the Dharma to remain in our world. And His Holiness has long since recognized that there are ever fewer people ordaining, and therefore there's a real danger of the Dharma disappearing from our world. So therefore, in the Tibetan communities, he encourages those at school, the various schools in the Tibetan community, to study the Dharma or to have the Dharma taught to students, and for them to engage in, of the three activities, hearing, reflecting, and meditating, to engage in two of them, in hearing and reflecting. As well as in the various villages, he encourages the Dharma to be made accessible to villagers as well, so that they too can hear and reflect. And thereby, the expanding the opportunity of those who can be part of those who cultivate the Dharma within, and thereby keep the Dharma alive and active in our world.
Chö tokpa tingin ki kiwa namla damchö ngundu chewi tuyo ba rigne jitar tokpa tar tenpa la jisu juba osan.
This then brings us to the fourth endowment pertaining to others. The teachings survive and are being followed means that through that very realization of the Dharma, there are those there are those who see that beings have the power to directly perceive the Holy Dharma and who then follow the teachings in accordance with that realization.
근데 가르쳐 왔어 하고는 마샬레 송고로 와시고로 지상 기워 남라 담주용 숨도 자위기 투여바 링니에서 현다디게 은취 냠는 제게 담비 취 냠는 제게 누버여바 여바 하고네 리네 아니 지대로 또 봤다 소속에 강셰바 나신 아니 땜바라 콘솔 파 띵제 아니 콘솔 취기라 제수주 냠는 제주고로 해서 딘데 제주바들 땜바라 제수주바라 그래 세상 소소라게 냠는지 소소의 냠는지 하고 거디 이 셴파 띵제 셴리안 띵제 콘주에도 냠는 제주바들라 되네 취네 발에 지수주바세 취유 지수주바세 되는 시송을 해서 얻는다.
The teachings survive and are being followed. Lama Tsongkhapa explains that this means that through the very realization of the Dharma, in other words, through having engaged in extensive study and reflection, one comes to cultivate the meaning of the Dharma within oneself. So again, this is very clear that it doesn't refer to a mere intellectual knowledge, but cultivated it within oneself. There are those who see that beings have the power to directly perceive the Holy Dharma, and who then follow the teachings in accordance with that realization. So having given rise to some degree of realization within themselves, then they teach others, recognizing that those around them, just like them, also have the capacity to cultivate the Dharma within. So in accordance with their own knowledge, which has been integrated within themselves, the realization they've attained, they then teach others.
지 로마티게라야 니게인데 기기 마취 시 냠소 렌치지도다 니한주기다 상예기 덴발이야 지게 최내발이 지수주파사 책으로 마치 롭티체 콘솔 냠소 렌치도 최내발이 지수주파사 책으로 인디나시 안주디와이네 니초사칼이 세그림이 책이 네 배직 취내 발의 지수주의 단달이야 네 루바가 제칼이야 최소수 네 최소수네 안델이야 로마티켈이야 최시해 안네 지게 이실라서 밖에 다 최시주도 제사데 우도시네 템발의 지수주 발체네 랍이 냠슬 내주고 가자 템발의 지수주 바 세데 우도시네 도스는 거라다 되게 나야지 도스차기로 와다 아주 그 뭐지 beniki 합쳐살에 최소수의 김제디 지사 최내발의 지수주의기 도나리아 최소제 도치는 거로 지사들에서 대해다
So those engaging in the monastic institutions in extensive study, through this process, as they cultivate the Dharma within and their own minds change, and the valuing of the Dharma is thereby enhanced, the wish to be of benefit to others, in particular to help them cultivate the Dharma within themselves, becomes an ever greater source of motivation for them to continue their own spiritual development, because they've come to see the impact the Dharma has on their own minds through study and reflection, and thereby want to help others attain similar benefits. And then some great practitioners, such as Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they expressed this wish to ensure that the Dharma remains in the world, as well as remains in the world through ever more people having the opportunity to cultivate it within. So Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, with such a wish, established the FPMT and the many centers throughout the world. And then in independence on utilizing geshes and other resident teachers, then the Dharma centers that are spread throughout our world, they help bring this about, help achieve that the Dharma remains within our world through qualified teachers guiding students in how to cultivate the Dharma within. So through skillful actions such as, through great beings such as Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, then the Dharma becomes ever more established in our world. And again, the meaning of the Dharma being established is that students cultivate it within their own minds, and that's where it is established.
的先以宁在话说的，先以其实宁在话结巴你说的，但先以但你听见这个话，先以其实宁在话结巴说的。第一段那的，第一段那开始送我是呢，宁在话结巴说的，开始说是呢，金宝波当金大给确实说对了我说的。
Then the fifth endowment pertaining to others is that there's loving kindness and compassion for the sake of others, which Lama Tsongkhapa then explains. This means that there are donors and benefactors who provide monastic robes and the like.
상계의 최수비 땜바 내바 엔덴발의 지수주바 여바 이내 소수의 튕긴되는 차상 상대바 이내 야 델리아 가르고 보세는 안술이야 새동이야 당고요 누글하게 튕기는 고고로 디메나 최제 투약의 냠내제 투약고 거라요 말와 되는자 되니기 냠내 제알이야 안디 고고레스 튕기는 고고라서 새동이야다 된 도로다 되니기 튕긴 이제 튕긴 고고로 와서 디 튕긴 고고레제 디 튕긴 데라 디 튕긴 루비야게 되나 소소라랑게 레가제 조되면 양치 레가제 되는 최지야 고브라고 말하냐면 저 고브라고 말와 진짜 니네 인자 내려야 로봇에게 진보보 진바 진다 고고래지 진다다 안진다기 진바보다 진다기 안텔이야 안지 칼라다 놀러라 소바 되게 맹기 지게 튕겨라 소바도 대바 유반데 데니스티아 고고래 제산 데니시라 현이 칠 아니 닝저어 제바 세드 현 냠내제랴 베베지게 투 제외톤에 펜베 삼베톤 제외 삼톤에 안델이야 도시네 진다다 진다게 되는 게 로봇이야디 고거래 제래 디메나야 즉 죄념을 제할래 그 바체래 강아래 해서래.
The meaning then of this final endowment pertaining to others is that even should one have all the freedoms and endowments, the other 17, one still requires sustenance. One needs to maintain this precious body through food, clothing, medicine, and so forth. So one requires a number of favorable circumstances so as to make the most of this life. But if, in order to physically take care of oneself, one needs to work full-time, then of course this poses an obstacle to engage fully in the Dharma, hence the need for support of benefactors. And benefactors here are those who, with a sincere motivation, give to help those who also with a sincere motivation are striving in cultivating the Dharma within.
디네 인자다 저기 다 지게 저 랍중에 대 롬에 지간라 로봇이야라 소바다 디네게 지게 신입대 로봇이야 안디메비게다 참바와제 참 되게 저리야 안지 진다지 로봇이야 안디메비게다 저기 다 쳐서라 소바 디네게 토네 안지 죄념을 제야랴 안투yen 된 로봇이야 진짜 그래서 아니 신용원에 이런 저리야 냠는 제발로 고해야지 좋아다 고고자 디수데니스 고고래 디네 퉁이 참고고래 디네 라고고래서 디네 메나 최신냠는 제발로 고가 라고요 말해야지 다디 도시네다 디네기 디소 안에 신주어선 신용원에 마음을 냠는 제발라 디네기 퉁이 두고지 고고래 해야지 송고로와.
So here, then those who have an abundance of either where they can offer physical help or material support rather, to the ordained or to those engaged in retreat or to places of Dharma activity such as Dharma centers, then this is encouraged so that through communal endeavor, then all or many more can come to gain benefit from the Dharma.
대소래단 대 현주가 서울다 현주가 현용원에 아주를 튕겨 참고해야 되게다 지금 전부들 상예 초고주의 넘버 된제 그래서 초고주의 넘버 된제 상예 펴봐 안에 상예기 펴봐 좀 상예 맞추송 안 추송비 냠내는 거 찾아다 지게 내려봐 내 냠내지야 여봐 내봐지 내네 내봐서 맞에 취 땡해 냠내는 거 수된제 냐 디제수 주간 여봐지 안델이야 냠는 제발이야 시행진다 로봇체겐 아니 저 튕게 로봇체겐 유아바시 어디 현주가스 다 되니게 당한 주게 된 제상한 주 도스체스 디다류딘데라 단주글류데레스 다 주에 냠는 제약이 다딘 약쇼디데스 오다데.
Then these are the five endowments pertaining to others. So the first was that the Buddha has appeared in our world manifestly or obviously as a Buddha and and taught the Holy Dharma, and that those teachings remain in the world and remain in their complete form. The complete trainings required to attain liberation and enlightenment remain in the world and are being followed. In other words, that there are those who are cultivating them within and teaching others. And then lastly, that they are supported by benefactors through an attitude of loving kindness and compassion. So then that then concludes the 18 freedoms and endowments, which present the very best of circumstances for one to engage in the Dharma. Lama Tsongkhapa concludes, as these five are present in the mind stream of others and constitute conditions for accomplishing the Dharma, they are called endowments pertaining to others.
I just have a question, if that's possible. With one of the, I'm just wondering if the freedom of being having, the freedom from having impaired faculties is different from the endowment of having unimpaired faculties. And if so, what are the different causes for those?
So is there a difference between the freedom and endowment, where there are the two that relate to unimpeded capacities, faculties? And if there is a difference, what are the different causes for them?
Giovanna, let's hear it. Chichibare, Chidi, Kotedan, Chibare, that is the Chidilla Carson, Mikumbe, Chane, Mikumbe, Immersion della, the Womasa and go to Womasawa, Mikumbe, yes, as you. That is the share near and Drache, Jawa de la Nen, or Casore, near than Rancho, as Sigurua. The Chibadina, Chibati.
They are identical, so therefore the cause will be the same. So just to be clear, there was one freedom we looked at last night, which was being free from being intellectually impaired, mute, or having impeded sense faculties, such as being blind or deaf and so forth. And this, as we've seen here today, is the same as one of the endowments pertaining to oneself. So these are the same. One is having a particular quality, a particular favorable circumstance, that's the endowment, whereas the first was being free from an unfree state of being intellectually impeded or physically impeded.
마상와다 균열이라로 디링다 가사 마상교디 디링 창되바디 시고로 창되바자 튕기래서 그러대.
So we can understand it as presented from two different perspectives. The one being a fault of a lack of freedom, and this being the endowment being a benefit of having a particular endowment or opportunity. So the one is being free from a particular fault, and the other one is having this benefit. So it's the same thing, presented from different perspective.
That is a Danganzu Ludin, Dawa Jedan Java, Joa Chusabikete, Nitiki Kitchen Tembashi, Chesada, Ludin the Yawashuri said, that's on Yegi, Gova Taratsedelia, Kiawachima, Lada Mukova Toyegi, Ludia, your Dela Satu Gore. Then and the Tarbiokova, Dito Tamji Kimbokova, didn't dare to war, etc. Chisada, and didn't dare to war, Chisada, said Chi, Lu Chilia, San Yoko to be didn't dare to war, etc. Chisa Denigi didn't have a change, etc. Chisa Hajanda and the mid Legend, Hagi, Ludin Delia, Denigi, China, Yamlingi, Rimbakiwa, Unguri, in a Tolam, the Sarto Kiwa Yumarella. Tolam Sarto Kiwa, the Niger, Kamala Yam, Tolam Kiwa, the Injimiji me till a Kiwa, Madol Hai, in the Chicas, Suha Sumit, so let Tolam Kitu Mares, Injimiji, me till a Kiwa, Miko Ration. When the Niger, that says usually Yamniji, the Sanjo Komotoetela, that the Tenju, me Lutin Mato, Lay Lutin, the Shandat, Kitu Mares, Kitu Mare, the Zangan Lutin, the Chickadenigue, that Za Chimboda. Jiki Peshe Chimbo Shushi is or Danganzi, that Danju Lutin said in his years, Sungorwa. Tompany wasn't to add your Tolam said, Tolam Dangboki did that Injimiji David, me, Devatin, Yomatu Suda, Sumega, Kam Delia, Lamkia, your Tologom Lamkia, your Ungri, the Tolam Dinjimiji, David and me, Kiwa mother, the Yakumanaki to your Malesa.
So that then is the presentation so that one can come to recognize or identify that these 18 freedoms and endowments we have all achieved. And they are so important because this is the ideal basis upon which we can achieve further precious human rebirths, achieve liberation from the suffering realms of samsara, or even enlightenment. In fact, this is the ideal basis upon which we can achieve Buddhahood. So amongst the many gods, there are those that are, as I mentioned, who can practice the Dharma. But amongst those who can practice the Dharma, there aren't any who can newly achieve the path of seeing. So when they, with their clairvoyance, and they are aware of us as human beings engaging and practicing the Dharma, they too desire such a rebirth as we have achieved, a precious human rebirth, because of this being the supreme basis upon which one can spiritually develop.
dawa ketan jo chusan wi ludin de la da ju ludin la gre sa song de ma anda ngang ju ge da so so ngang ju so so ran sam ta we na da ngang nge ludin de da ju ludin de re de min do sem be ge da ngang ju ge da ngo che go lo da ngo song go lo ha go go lo ngang ju ludin de da ju ludin re do re min do sem be ge sam ta ye de ye sa da ngang ju ge du sam de ka san dawa ketan da wan cha lo da ju mi khon be ge ne le ma ke ba che 미콘베 내라 게요 말에 마게 말에 유우스 게려와 미콘베 내라 마게 말에와 가와 게려서 유우스 게려와 코로나시 메사들라 마게 말와 디미 유타오블와 유타오블 게요 말에 그 코로나시 메사사지 유타오블에 대다 마게 말에 제가 미콘베 내 데레 유타오블 자와래 근데 가와 게려서 유우스 코로나시 요새 사지들 게려와 유우스 게려와 제가 내내게连续我马上话马上话我们车上唱的了就是我们车上唱话的马上话的来给予马的就是我们车上唱话的就是大话的教话的来点吧的那连续的他工作的呀老大那个就给了要马话没办法没办法的的那上街干没办的马的上街干约瑟的来给的了上街去送约瑟的给了就是他刚上那经那就야와바 다 둔로다 데네 이다는 말에 제가 같이는 뭐 하모를 말하고 제가 데네기다 다와게다 저 가서 미콘바게다 되게 다와 주디 먼저 게다 상대바제 다 저거 주는 라주가 세대 소소 미니레 유우스게요래 아니 지게 소소 오모 차상 상화래 데네 야 데네 숨는 대바리요래 제가 다 라주가 돼서 나 현주는 상기 zemblin chogu juge number in zemblin sanje peyore sanje peyoma sanje chue sung yore chanji sanje chue sung be nyamlen girin ba de bardo ne de sanje den ba ne de bare ane ba ma se an sanje chue de nga zu nyamlen girin ba de ma zu ya den ge lama da ge shin den ge yo ba che de yo ba de wa de ne ha chi ran le ya chue ji nyamlen che ba le shen yi tun yi to ne ro che ba de ne ge cha sa tun yi zum de ba 디네 삼단에다 디네 랑경원에 삼단에 가서 류된디 다와 계단데 덴바 조와 주상와다 다주 그래서 다주 류된사데 상와 차려와 디네 자다 다디 가서 류된데 자친부 인바데 다시네지 다주 류디레도 와 소소 류된데 다와 계단 조와 주상비게다 상계다 다 디네야 Lama chasangi daju lutini yakure sa ngao jo je se lutini nga lutia de dina de do asambi la nga zo ngo so ya de chagor wa ngo so tu ya de.
The purpose, as mentioned last night, the purpose of reflecting on the 18 freedoms and endowments, or coming to recognize that we have achieved them, is so that we truly value what we have attained in this life. And we no longer take it for granted, letting this opportunity pass us by. So in the meditation, one briefly goes through these 18 qualities, recognizing that, of course, we have been born as a human. We are free from being born as a long-lived god or in any of the three lower realms. And we are not just born as a human anywhere, but we are in we are free from being born in a what was it called? A barbarian country, a savage land. And rather, we are somewhere that is considered a central land because the four types of followers are active, are present. And not only that, but we have complete sense faculties, and we are not severely mentally challenged. And moreover, we don't hold strong wrong views. And we do not hold strong wrong views, and that the teachings are present where we live. So we've attained this state of freedom. And the meaning again of freedom is one has the freedom to practice the Dharma. One has the freedom to practice the Dharma. But not only that, we have the endowments or the favorable circumstances or the opportunities to also practice the Dharma. In that, again, we're born as a human being in a central land with complete faculties. We haven't done any of the extreme karmic actions. And we also have faith in the teachings of the Buddha. We have trust in the teachings of the Buddha. And moreover, then in terms of the endowments pertaining to others, a Buddha has appeared in our world. And the Buddha not only manifestly appeared in a world, but taught the Dharma. And that Dharma was taught completely and remains in our world in its complete form. In other words, through training in the Dharma, we can actualize all the qualities of the Dharma within us. Nothing is missing from what is present in our world. And we have, and furthermore, there are practitioners of the Dharma in the world. In other words, those who have, through extensive effort over lifetimes, have come to realize the various qualities of the Dharma within, and therefore teach and guide others. And we have the great opportunity we have the great fortune of being under the care and guidance of fully qualified spiritual teachers. And not only that, we have excellent material conditions through communal support. We have the material conditions that are required so that we can engage in the Dharma. So then these are, in brief, the freedoms and endowments. Here in the reflection again, one goes through them, recognizing what we have achieved, but the purpose of recognizing what we've achieved is so that we value it. We don't take it for granted, and we determine to utilize well what we have achieved or put it to good use.
dawa ke se de ni shi jo chu se de ni se song ya de da din ma song wa na xin jing a zo sam da je o da di de song wa na xin jing a zo lu tin di re de me do sam da de di song wa na xin a zo lu tin da ga ra re de ba na chi za da yin ba di song wa na xin ge lu tin di di na shi re do sa be sam la ha go yo de ha go de so su ge da ji lu tin di ngwe song wa da ji ngwe song wa da ha go song la di o de ngi di lu tin di dawa ke da jo chu sang yu din de do a san pe ke ha go yo de nda chu ngo so a so je san de ha go ye ge don da la dawa ke se de ni shi lai de jo chu se de ni shi lai de se ma re de she ya ro je da de shi ya ba na xin jin da nga so so lu din de o di re de min de sam da de di che she ban sung ba na xin da ga ra re de na ha go yo de o da ga re do sam be sam da de da wa ngo so wa le di na xin da sung wa na xin ji de ji ni sang be na 나는 어디든가 다와 얘는 저 상화의 레민도 와서 하고도 그러. 진짜 대중을 송와서 다주의 뭐에 송와서 하고 와서 그런다. 하고 왔을 때 대마 대시 된다 마시는데 될 때네 네 소수율인데 다 디레도 민도 삼다데 임바드레샤 삼배 하고 있는데 대중을 송화리다.
Then concludes the presentation on the explanation of what these 18 freedoms and endowments are. So of the three outlines of this chapter, then this is the first one, and the identification of the freedoms and endowments. So it's for us then to identify, or that can also be translated as recognize, that we have achieved these. We would know if any were incomplete, but we will come to recognize that we have achieved all of the states of freedom, as well as the favorable circumstances, the 10 endowments, 5 relating to oneself and 5 to others.
소소게 안에 뽑아기 오래 다딩이 다주 리든 딩이 다주 리든 레도와 시산 디베 시다 마 상계다 자주 셈바다 라마 차상계 야 나버체세 리든 레도와 다딩이 리든 베하고 중샤 셈베게 소소 안에 지게 가오 고미하다 뽑아기하다 어디 리든 주에 대한 개왕함에게 미 아주 개왕함아 가사디 기위 냠는 배 야구 주도와 디 냠는 제발 개와 배 야구 주샤 선배 개왕함에게 가사디 다 개와 제발들에 소수 제수 일하지 와 제수 집에 야구 주배 제샤 선배 야구 준서 제수 일하지야다 근데 지금 디니 삼톤에 다 소수게 디니 유리된데 자 첨부디 될이야 개위 냠는데 다 지금 배 닝도 shum고야 민도 디니 야구를 시대자 개위 자와데 지기 냠네 야구 지기 때 주투에게 된 개발지 여반사 다디 냠네 제는 주투에 레도와 대장에 냠네 지기 세배당 안쪽에 냠네 지에게 뒤바 제다 델리아다 냠네 지에 준르게 다 돈다 닝보디 난주 류모 송고야디 윤첸디 윤첸 가르람나 델레티네 소수게다 오다 딘 디네 야구 레샤 선배게 닝도게 딘 델레 디네기 딘 야구 델리앙에 된 냠네 지기 세배게다 냠는 제기 듬버기야다 냠는 제기 준주기야기 디던달라 당어 중고 소야 디로와다 디고 고레스다 don달링 볼라 아주 도시네 삼을 도스탄고 고레스 모르다.
In this meditation, which I really encourage you to do, we have some time on this chapter. Go through these 18 qualities, recognize that you have achieved them. And whilst it may seem repetitive to do that, what the important part to come to the meditation, following recognizing we've achieved these 18 qualities, is to generate a sincere appreciation, a sincere valuing of what we've achieved, to no longer take this opportunity, this life, for granted, thinking that this is something ordinary. Through this reflection, where we become aware of the great expanse of varying life forms, the great expanse of differing beings, we come to see how rare and precious this is. This is incredibly important, because this is the basis by which we come to a determination. I will utilize what remains of this life well. I will ensure that I keep my mind on the Dharma, that I practice well. I will not take it for granted, because what I have achieved here is rare in this world. I'm truly fortunate, and I achieved this independence of my own endeavors in past lives. So here we appreciate what our former selves in past lives engaged in, and we now are enjoying this result. So let's utilize it well. No longer consider it something ordinary or commonplace, but to value it by putting it to good use. If in this process one starts to feel a little bit puffed up, a little bit pride, thinking, what I have achieved compared to so many others, this then is really not a case of utilizing this life well, because our afflictions are just arising. Rather, the point to come to in the meditation is a sense of confidence, not a sense of pride, but a sense of confidence and determination to utilize this well. The confidence comes from recognizing that this opportunity, this life, is a result of the causes we ourselves accumulated, and then the determination is, I will utilize this life well.
단주 뭐 소야 샤워다 디원마 제랑도 가르주야레선다 디니게 단주 류데니 베 된다 침부 예 침부 시오레 사지 소유슈야레 예 침부레 사자 다 가르스니 딘텔이야 데지 저게 지게 개와 침마 하다 미고바 토비기 냠는 제베네 딘텔의 제두거래 데네 달비고바 토야 세델리 자주미티보 토야 냠는 데베 제베네 딘텔의 제두거래 데네 전주신비기 냠는 제기네 상유고바 토 냠는 제베네 딘텔의 제두거래 디나신다 발신 TV 데네 상아 도지 TV기 냠는 제베네 딘텔의 제두거래 제사 디네자 아줄이야 딘캬바전에서 제자다 저기 도시원에다 되는 냠레 림바체데 할라 용고를 마도 ning 상하도 제테비 람년 제데 할라 용고 말에 디산 아주 미르라마도 용고서 데 미래야 당아주 데 지게 장점이 미세하게 미월 지겨울 장점이 미세주얼서 보다 아주기다 지단에 아주 죄는 마송다 제베나 지난디 디술야네 디니기라 진냠네 제게 고합 공부를 해서 그러다.
So through generating a sense of appreciation for what we've achieved and a determination to utilize this life well, this is an indispensable foundation to turn away from what distracts us so, what has so little meaning. And this understanding comes about through expanding our outlook, developing a broader vision. And the two outlines that follow, contemplating the great importance of the freedom of endowments and the difficulty in attaining them, these then add to this valuing of what we have achieved, where we come to recognize that all of us have the capacity to attain a similar rebirth again, but more than that, to bring about a radical transformation of our mind, a mind that is actually freed of the suffering realms of samsara. And moreover, in our training, we can conjoin that with a true valuing of others and a true appreciation of the kindness of others and generate bodhicitta itself. So all of us have the capacity in this life to become bodhisattvas. And attaining the path of bodhisattvas then, we can engage in the actual perfections. And we can engage in those perfections through the expression of training in secret mantra, being an actual practitioner of secret mantra. All of this is possible to us. And it's the full potential of the Dharma is something that is only available to human beings. Not even the gods can fully utilize the Dharma, fully actualize the Dharma. And amongst the variety of human beings, so we can take the traditional presentation on the 4 continents and the 8 subcontinents, where we live in Zambuling. It's only humans in this world who have such a capacity. So these again are all varying ways that we have looked at now and more that will come, that will encourage us to value this life and to utilize it well, turning away from what has no real meaning. We can finish here then for this morning, Katri. And if there are questions, then feel free to ask. Tsepa?
Geshe mentioned something about in the God realms you can't realize emptiness. I haven't heard that before. Attain the path of sin. So what are the reasons for that?
Why can gods not newly attain the path of seeing in the God realms? The reason is their lives are just too good. And from really just having this abundance of pleasure, even though they may have a strong determination to engage in the Dharma, because again, there are gods who do practice Dharma, they cannot strengthen their definite emergence enough or the renunciation enough to realize emptiness or to attain the path of seeing. So to attain the path of seeing, one needs a particularly strong determination coming from definite emergence. And this is really hard or is not possible for gods to develop because their lives are just too comfortable. Sure.
I have a question about the meaning of uninterrupted in relation to the Venus crimes. Does that mean that the karmic consequences is immediate? And if that's the case, does it apply to any other karmas we might produce in the lifetime?
So in the how was it translated? So the 5 uninterrupted karmas or the they use a word I can't say, the inexplicable, inexplicable heinous actions. Does that mean the karmic result is experienced immediately? And
further on, it says uninterrupted.
Yes.
So I'm asking, that expresses some sort of duration or
Yes.
timing.
Yes.
So that's my
Okay. So it's the same word, translated differently. So I'll ask Geshe to then explain that. Okay.
디 참여 세대 도다 만 죄날 마송에 참여라 용도 디 디버 제베나 제와 지나는 아주 제와 치만 니와게 내봐요 말 아주 디버 제베나 제네 시시네 바 안에가 소리 dunjoti waje, jemati waje, yewaje 용식고래. 다데들야 참여라 용도 시 차요 제려야 시네 제와 생각야 마송제 냐바도 니와 기로 지체자 니와다 다디 기와다 니위 기원이라 바야바야 참지요 바라지요 말해서 제산 되네 신의 남사 니와 기로 그래서 제가 참매서 참매서도 그ben에 당아주 된 마루도 바라들 동차를 참지요 되어와 어디네기 현다 조서 참여 막 그도 마 조서들 줘야 마도 안에 되래 참매서 그래 참세 바야래 바삼 지요 말해서 그러다 거기 줘야 돼 Yeah.
So first to say, there are many ways that this term is translated. So we have, as you said later, uninterruptible or something, and then they use above inexplicable, which I had to look it up. It means there's not allowing for atonement. But the word literally means no boundary or no intermediate space. So, yeah.
So
this word is a word for boundary, or it can be a word for border or junction. So for example, when we cross out in a few minutes from inside the Gompa to outside the Gompa, we walk through a doorway. And that can be the limit of within the Gompa, outside the Gompa. So such karmic actions have no such boundary, no such limit, no such junction. In that, in the immediate next rebirth, without any other rebirths, one is born in the hell realms because of the severity of that karmic action. So if such a karmic action, such as killing one's parents, is done in this life, in the next life, one's not born as an animal or as a human again, one is immediately born in hell. There's no bardo, there's nothing in between. One is immediately born in hells. So this is why it can be translated as immediate retribution. There's no period between the lifetimes, in the lifetime in which it's accumulated and when the result is experienced, which is the very next lifetime.
Is that the case that you haven't purified? Are you able to purify that action?
So can these 5 acts of immediate retribution be purified? So in some texts it is said that these 5 acts of immediate retribution cannot be purified. But in other texts where the 4 opponent powers are presented, there they say there is nothing that cannot be purified by means of the 4 opponent powers. So therefore I take that to mean that even these can be purified.
신이만 좀 제를 야니만 제보 뭐 마게다 세도 그런 바바데 수요시네 근데 그 참여를 사바레시 제가 되네 참여를 그배 양한제도 상얘기 그냥 최소한제 세들에 디버 샤고 냠내제 세들에 다시 비부터 말해서 제가 참여를 사요 되네고 니와 줘요 막아서 디버 다선 왔다죠.
And I base my view on a story from the sutras where at the time of the Buddha, a prince killed his parents so that he could become king. So he committed 2 of the 5 acts of immediate retribution, killing his mother and his father. And through meeting the Buddha and coming under the skillful guidance of the Buddha, he was able to become an arhat in that very life. So in that very life, he was able to purify those 2 acts of immediate retribution.
Okay.
Sure.
I had another part of my question, which was, if we flip the situation around to the side of virtue, is there an equivalent uninterrupted virtuous act that's going to arrive in the same way?
개월에 요리요리 개월에 이제 대대 이 개월에 될 망보래 통주 용주에 개월세다 통 최대라나 최대래 개월에 디디고 최대래 하면 되고 미야 개월 치면 미야 개월 치면 미야 디디 요리다 개월.
Yes, there are. So there's virtuous acts that one can experience even in this very life. So there certainly are.
Yeah, okay.